Welcome. We are live with this week's Drupal chat. This week we're going to be talking about Drupal 6. We did have a previous Drupal chat that was called What About Drupal 8? And we were looking at the question there about whether it made sense for people to start using Drupal 8 yet or not. What we're going to be talking about today is whether people need to be getting off Drupal 6 immediately. My name is Mark Isaacson, and I've been doing Drupal for something like 6 years now, and you can find me on drupal.org at Vegan Triathlete. I'm really happy today to have a couple people in the seats with us, Doug Van and Mike O'Hara. I will give them a chance to introduce themselves in just a moment here, and I will once again let you know that the replay will be available at teachyourselfdrupal.org, and we'll make sure that anything that we reference during the chat today, that I've got links to the various resources, or we'll put stuff in session notes so that it's easy for people to get to things. So let me go ahead and give Doug a chance to introduce himself. Doug, welcome to the show. Thanks for stopping on by today. Hey. Go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience.
So I'm distinguished. I'm the guy who left this tab open since the day you created the link. It's been sitting open. And my dog was going nuts down here because I was upstairs. I came down and heard voices, and it was this tab. So that's why I'm here. I'm like, oh, great, because I missed had the tab open for the last one too. Anyhow, great. Well, so I discovered Drupal in 2007, December, when Drupal 6 was in a high beta, and it launched like within 90 to 100 days after I discovered the word Drupal existed. So I had a huge project I launched on Drupal 5. And then getting Drupal 6 contrib up to snuff was challenging, and then it was better for 7. So I have a couple legacy 6 sites out there. I have a project right now. I'm moving from 6 to 7. So this is a topic that is very relevant for me.
Absolutely. Mike, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? Oh, we can't hear you, Mike.
No.
Let's see about getting your microphone set up there. Mike's mic is not working right now. Hi, Ty. Welcome back again. Yeah, we're still not getting anything from your input there. But we do want to have you take part in the conversation. So we may go ahead and get started talking, and we'll give you a chance to keep on saying stuff there. And when we can hear you, we'll let you know that we can hear you. For a moment there, it seemed like I might have been getting a bit of feedback through somebody's speaker into the microphone. That may have been coming through Doug's. But right now I'm not hearing any feedback there. But yeah, that would be great if we could all make sure that we use headsets so that we don't get our own microphones playing back right through our speakers. So, okay, Mike, we're going to give you, please do keep working on it and see if you're able to get your volume going there, because I want to hear what you have to say as well about this. So, okay, Doug, you've got some Drupal 6 sites. I definitely have some Drupal 6 sites. You mentioned that you also had some Drupal 5 sites. As far as I know, and I didn't actually research it before the show today because I didn't think I really wanted to be necessarily publicizing older Drupal sites just in case. But I believe there are a fair number of live sites that are still running on Drupal 5 at this point. And this was a number of years ago, so I don't know whether this particular site exists or not. Done some work on a site that was on Drupal like 4.1 or 4.2. Like I say, I don't know whether that site is still out there. This was even a few years ago that I had come across that one. So maybe that one's not in existence anymore. So despite the fact that now Drupal 6 is end of life, there are even still Drupal 5 sites that I'm certain are still out there, and potentially Drupal 4 sites. So let's just start with I think I'm actually hearing you. I saw your wires. Yep. Yay. So go ahead, Mike. I guess I vamped for long enough. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, my name is Mike O'Hara. I've been kind of a Drupal evangelist of sorts now for the last 3 or 4 years. Started out with Drupal in 2011-12, just as the Drupal 7 world kind of ramped up. Did my first horrible-looking site in Drupal 6. Got incredibly frustrated with that, and then was super happy when 7 came out. And kind of 7 changed my worldview on Drupal, and that's kind of where I've been ever since.
Okay, so do you actually have any live Drupal 6 sites now, or did you just abandon that Drupal 6 site?
I have one site left on Drupal 6, but I haven't maintained it in a while, but it's still there and it's still receiving visitors.
Okay, all right. So before we launch into the conversation, for anybody that's going to be catching this at any point in time, so today is Leap Day. We're in a leap year this year. So it's February 29, 2016. So just point of reference there. And before we get into any of our discussion about should you or shouldn't you, I want to throw out the caveat out there that I'm not looking to get complacent or make too light of anything that we're saying about whether you need to get off Drupal 6 or not, or Drupal 5 if you're still on Drupal 5. That a lot of this is going to be a matter of it depends on your situation. So just keep that in mind as you listen to our discussion here, and know that what we say needs to be taken perhaps with a grain of salt and tailored to your specific situation, so that we don't throw ourselves into any type of situation here that people say, well, I watched this Drupal chat and they said, and then we got people coming back at us because they maybe ran into some problem. So the first question that I'll throw out for the three of us here in the seats is, and all of us, and we've all said we've got Drupal 6 sites right now. So the question that I think we'll start with, so in our own personal situation right now, are we planning to get off those sites, migrate them as quickly as possible? You know, what are we going to be doing? And so I'll speak for myself first, and then I'll give Doug and Mike a chance to speak for themselves. So I have a number of client sites that I'm hosting on my server infrastructure that I built on Drupal 6. And the reality for me is that these clients really are not in a position that they are going to put the budget up for me to migrate them off Drupal 6. I mean, that's just the way it is now. Like, that's the reality. And so in my situation, regardless of whether I would say we must do this or that, they're on Drupal 6. And that's just the way that it is. And so for me, the truth of the matter is that, yes, Drupal 6 is end of life. And, well, then that just means I'm not going to have to continue updating their Drupal code for them in the Drupal contributed modules while they're on my platform. But I am going to continue to allow them to be on my platform. I'm not going to kick them off. I'm not going to say you have to go to shared hosting. I'm not taking this risk. I'm too concerned that I'm going to get hacked. I'm not going to force them to upgrade. I'm comfortable enough with the sites that I'm hosting that I'm not overly concerned that, oh, well, Drupal 6 isn't receiving any more security updates, and now that means that somebody's going to be able to hack into my server through the Drupal 6 sites. So that's my situation. That the short answer, the TLDR of this whole Drupal chat, is that I'm not taking them off Drupal 6. I'm not going to dump it right now, and I don't know at what point I would dump it, at all. So let me throw it over to Doug, and let me ask you what you're planning to do about your Drupal 6 sites and how you're going to approach things.
Yeah. So among the Drupal 6 sites I have, only one have I created, two that I've created, one I inherited. And the one I inherited wants to move off of 6. I'm going to Drupal 7 for that one. And as soon as they get their budgetary whatever thing worked out, they will sign the contract and we'll start it. I'm simply going to rebuild it in 7 and then run the data over. And I'll probably use some custom migration scripts because long before Backup and Migrate was around, we just did that by hand. And it's such a simple site. I'm actually better at that than I am using the OOP of the Migrate module. The other two D6 projects, I think they're out of money, and I don't see them. probably not going to bother them. But I do have a handful of D7 projects to move on, and I'm going to encourage about half of those probably to go to Backdrop, and the other half to go to Drupal 8.
Okay. And these Drupal 6 sites that you were mentioning that don't have the budget, are these on your servers or are these on somebody else's servers?
None of them are on my servers. Yeah,
okay, so
over the years, I've gotten out of that business for sure.
Yeah, so you're not personally affected by whether they experience any security vulnerability or not. So for you, it's not so much a matter of that you've got any personal liability that can come into this, whether they migrate or don't. It's kind of like, well, they're on their own servers and they can go ahead and do whatever they want with that.
Exactly.
All right, Mike, so I think you said that you did actually have some Drupal 6 sites. So what are you planning to do with your Drupal 6 sites?
Well, it comes down to many of the types of arguments that you had, Mark. It's a budgetary concern, and the sites that are on Drupal 6 are probably going to stay on it unless some magical thing happens. I have to look at it as a kind of a financial thing because time is money. But I also have to look at it from a security concern as well. Anything that I'm hosting in my infrastructure, I do kind of keep an eye on, and I try and stay cognizant of security issues that come up. The good news is, with the way our community works, even sites that are on Drupal 6 may still receive updates. They're just not going to be community kind of core updates that's validated by Drupal.org. But if somebody commits a patch or somebody talks about something, that may still be available. One thing we have to look at isn't just the sites that we have now, it's the sites we could inherit in the future. And I already had one come up a couple weeks ago, the Drupal 6 site that was looking for options to migrate. And it became a value case. Is it worth migrating or keeping with it or whatnot? As far as my current sites, I have no plans to do anything with them other than if the opportunity comes up, I will migrate them. If I can't migrate them, the ones I'm still hosting, I have a number of different security software that I run on my server. I'll increase the security profiles on those sites and limit their ability to do any damage if something ever came up.
Okay, so you are thinking that you'd get some type of additional security measures in place.
Yeah, and I already have that now because even in my Drupal 7 sites, it's happened where a site had been compromised by a nefarious individual and somebody dropped some nasty little scripts that started doing things like mailing out. So there's certain protocols I've put in place on my server and certain things that I've done to mitigate potential damage in the future. And I'll just increase those measures for sites that may be in higher risk because of lack of security updates or whatnot.
Okay. Now, for the rest of this chat, I'm going to operate under the assumption that that all of us feel somewhat comfortable with the idea of saying, no, you don't need to ditch Drupal 6 immediately. Because if that's all that we felt, it would be a relatively short chat. We would all get on and we would say, yes, get off Drupal 6, boom, end of story, thanks, have a great afternoon. And that wouldn't make a very interesting chat. So if I'm way off on that assumption, Doug or Mike, if that's exactly what you want to say, call me on that right now. Otherwise, I'm looking first to have more of a discussion of the considerations that people have and help people to understand. For some people, I'm going to argue, have nothing to worry about. And I'll throw out some examples of sites, not particular domain names, but types of sites, the way that they're set up, of where you probably don't really have anything that you're going to need to worry about. And then, I would like to hear your thoughts as well about, how worried people should be. So for my part, one of the things that I think is a big consideration for whether you are actually exposed to any security vulnerability depends on whether your site even allows people to sign in. If, like, for instance, some of the sites that I'm hosting, and I'd have to look back at the various Drupal 6 sites, but a good number of the Drupal 6 sites that I'm hosting are essentially like marketing brochure sites. They're kind of like push content, almost like static sites, and they aren't having people sign in. People don't leave comments. People don't get to create content on the site. And so there's very little opportunity for anybody to take any type of nefarious actions. They're not uploading files. They're not uploading images. They're just, this site, they can't even sign into it, random users. And so I would argue in a situation like that you have almost zero vulnerability. Now, I don't remember with Drupal Get-in if there was a way that even that anonymous people were able to do stuff on the site. And before I got on the show today, I did actually look through this latest security patch that was applied to Drupal 6, and I have to admit, I read it, it's way over my head exactly what they're describing. Even when I tried to look at some of the things with the commits to see parts of the code that they changed, let's say that these were bugs that were found in Drupal 7 and 8, and Drupal 6 was already at EOL before this point, and these patches weren't going to be backported to Drupal 6. I wouldn't really have a clear sense looking at the security advisor that they sent out now, would the Drupal 6 sites be vulnerable or not? But that's a starting point that I would look at, is that if you've got a site that you don't even have people signing into, that this is going to mitigate most of the security vulnerabilities that you would see on any site of any version that you have. So Doug and Mike, what would you say about that? Would you agree with me? Or?
Probably going to be a lot of disagreement on this one from me. Drupal Get-in was most definitely a threat for anonymous traffic. The SQL injection in the URL and taking over and writing tables and getting file level access. It was horrible. It was amazing. And it was there for a very long time. If anybody doesn't know that, it was there for the longest time, and only got discovered late in somebody else's audit. So that was definitely an anonymous issue. My concern over having a D6 site sitting around too long, even if it's largely static, even the presence of a contact form, whether it's a core contact module or Nate's web form or anything else, or even a search box, is an interactive device. That opens up some concerns. Also, being Drupal 6 is going to be an older version of PHP. I'm not aware of versions of PHP exposing risk, and I'm not super risk averse. I'm a risk taker, not a risk avoider. But if I knew I had anybody important on Drupal 6 running on an old PHP, my sales pitch for getting them off of 6 is get off of old PHP, get off of an old Drupal, and it's a pretty clear-cut case. So I wouldn't leave even the most basic site up on D6. Okay. If the client can't afford it, they can die in Drupal 6. But if they can afford it, get off.
Okay. All right. What would you say about what are your thoughts on that, Mike?
Well, I tend to agree with Doug in that sense. There's a lot of collateral damage potential with older products. Doesn't matter what they are. You could even look at the same arguments as individuals in enterprise settings still running Windows XP. A lot of the same arguments exist. You have old hardware that could fail. You have old software that, either through laziness or lack of money or both, they still exist. I think I agree with Doug. It's my primary statement.
Okay. So what the two of you are saying is that pretty much, to put it in a nutshell, is that the two of you would take the standpoint that I really am being too complacent, and even giving this particular setup where I say, hey, if you have a site that's basically a static site, you're going to be okay. You don't have too much to worry about. That the two of you are saying, well, yeah, I still wouldn't feel too comfortable with that. That you really wouldn't classify any type of site as being, hey, no sweat. You pretty much have a free ride here. That regardless of the.
I think there's two ways to look at this, and it comes down to the value proposition side, where is the effort to convert the site less than cleaning up the damage that happens if you don't do it. And you have to look at it from a couple of different factors like that, because even if you think, well, my site doesn't get any traffic, I won't have to worry about this because it only gets 5 or 10 visitors a month or whatever it is. Even sites with no traffic still can get compromised just as
Yeah,
easily
yeah.
as a site with tens of thousands of users.
Yeah.
There are things you can do to mitigate the damage. There are things you can do to prolong it, but I don't think you can leave it alone forever. And that's you need to take the balance. You can't. I don't think either argument that you have to shut it down right now and you have to convert it no matter the expense is the right answer. And I don't think whatever works either. So I think we need to find that. I think as an admin and as a reputable Drupal person that you need to find that balance and you need to communicate the risks and rewards of doing either thing.
And it's interesting because I know. So I had built a site for my wife, and honestly, embarrassing enough or full disclosure enough here, my wife decided that she wants to get her site off Drupal, and she's getting her site onto Weebly because she just wants to be able to maintain it easier on her own. And it just was creating like too much tension between the two of us, where she was asking questions about things and I wasn't being able to have enough patience and understanding for her with things. So she decided this would be better for our relationship for her to not have her site on Drupal. She's working on getting her site relaunched on Weebly. But at any rate, the site that I had built for her was built in Drupal 6, and she did get a message through her contact form, and I forget which agency it was who had contacted her, but they said, oh, we noticed you have a Drupal 6 site. Did you know that Drupal 6 is end of life? Hey, you should let us upgrade your site for you so that you won't be vulnerable to this unsupported Drupal. So there are definitely people that are out there who are making this pitch, looking for people who are on Drupal 6 sites and giving them that sales pitch of, let us help, upgrade your site from Drupal 6. I don't know that, I don't know if I've gotten any contacts through, like my Isaacson web development site is on Drupal 6. And I don't know that I've gotten any messages through my contact form from people saying, let us upgrade your site from Drupal 6. It's interesting that I have been getting a lot of contacts recently from people about, let us redesign, let us increase the traffic to your site. And it's kind of funny to me because, like, are you even looking at the fact that the site you're talking about is called Isaacson Web Development? Don't you think if I really wanted to do this, I could do it on my own?
Oh, I get, I don't know, 10 or 20 a week. So
yeah,
from different properties.
Yeah. So, okay. So then maybe let's have a look at this from a bit of a different perspective then, since it's 2-1 here on this chat of like, no, dude, you're way off. I'm not going to hang with you on that one of like, you might be able to just kind of to ride with it for a while here that you do need to take this more seriously and not be as complacent about it. Now, I think it's worthwhile for us to talk about. So Doug mentioned with Drupal Get-In, there was this, and it was a serious vulnerability. I mean, there were no jokes about this. There were no two ways about it. And this was Drupal core. A lot of times what you'll see with vulnerabilities actually have to do with contributed modules or custom things that haven't implemented things the right way. Core, it generally is pretty solid. And when you're finding these types of things, it generally is a result of, I think more often than not, an enterprise level company who has paid a firm to come in to audit their sites and probe their sites to see if they can come up with any of these creative types of attacks on a site. So even finding these vulnerabilities, for the most part, requires somebody with a pretty good amount of expertise specifically looking for exploits. But with Drupal 7, there was this exploit that was found. It was in Drupal core, and it was exploitable by anonymous people. The thing that I want to talk about, though, is that it had been something that was actually out there for quite a good long period of time without anybody being aware of it. And I don't remember which agency, it's not a web development agency, but which security agency was actually able to uncover that. And honestly, I never totally understood that exploit either, what it was. So when we look at something like Drupal 6, it did just get this latest security patch. I think in terms, even coming from the perspective of saying that, well, you do need to be looking at getting off Drupal 6. And as Mike said already, it's not that there's a panic rush. You have to get off it immediately. Right now you have to leave it. Is to take into consideration like how often things are actually found, and when there's even potential exploits that are out there that nobody's even aware of. So let's hear what the two of you have to say in terms of like time frame that you think people should be looking at in terms of where you think they need to be putting together some type of strategy for getting themselves off a Drupal 6 site. So whichever one of you wants to go first,
there
go
were a
ahead.
couple topics there.
Okay.
Number one, I hope everybody on this call or listening to this in the future is on the security mailing list of Drupal.org.
Yeah.
Those of us who are on it have been on it for so long, and the pages that let you do that have changed. We've gone through 3 versions.
Right.
So I Googled Drupal security email list, and I got Drupal.org/mailing-lists. I subscribe to all of them. I mean, Drupal does not send you much. They're terrified of being called a spam. And also they have international regulations, so you can hardly send somebody a password, reset link in Europe without violating some law out there, it seems like. But anyhow, enough with Europe bashing. So get on that list, number one. Number two, a lot of the crud you're going to find on there is pretty meaningless. So-and-so module has an update. There was a cross-site scripting potential if a user with the proper privileges was logged in. And it's not just privilege to leave a comment. It's like privilege to do important things. The person that can do that probably has access to the server, maybe the room the server's in, and maybe even a company credit card. So they can do a lot more damage than just dropping your tables if they want.
I think that's a big thing to disclose too. That many vulnerabilities on Drupal side, there are very few that are just wide open, wild, horrible things. Very few.
Very.
Most cases require very specific use cases, very specific permissions and roles combinations that the average, as we call it, brochure site, likely, unless they did something really silly, don't have. And
then on top of it, there's the generic type of catchphrase that they use through a specially crafted URL or some such thing like that. So it's not only a matter that you need to have the proper access, then you have to understand what you need to do to create this type of thing to happen. And that's more so where I was coming from when I was taking the attitude of, hey, no big deal, you're probably okay on Drupal 6. But I don't want to overstate how much things are mitigated. I actually want to give the due respect to what the two of you are saying, more along the lines of, actually, I think that you do need to be looking at some type of plan. So
the way I look at it, and I look at it the very same way that I look at D8 adoption. Or even really any new CMS adoption for a major version. When Drupal 7 came out, for example, and everybody was like, ooh, Drupal 7. I didn't do a Drupal site for 7 until 6 to 8 months after it was matured. And it's the same thing with Drupal 8, although with some of the stuff I'm working on, it's been forced for 8 because of various business reasons, but it's working out. But I think it's the very same thing. When you look at the version that's being depreciated because of the new version that's coming out, I think you're on the kind of a similar timeline. Within 6 to 8 months,
okay,
I think you should start building your migration plan and working your way off of it. If it's not to Drupal, then it's something else. We prefer you stay on Drupal, but really, Drupal isn't for everybody. And that's, I think, something that a lot of Drupal guys are afraid to admit to certain degrees, especially hardcore guys. But really, if you just need a brochure site, is Drupal really the best choice?
Right. And actually, we'll be looking at that more next week. That's the next chat that's queued up is when is Drupal, in parentheses, not a good option? And I think that's actually a good point to consider if you are somebody who's on Drupal 6, is to maybe think about, is Drupal still the best option for me? So that's one road that people can take, is it's not necessarily migrating from Drupal 6 to Drupal 7 or Drupal 8. Maybe you would be considering, do I want to stay on Drupal? Doug, you were kind of in the middle of a thought as well. So you were saying about make sure that you're on the security list. You were saying there were a couple of topics that I brought up here. So let's give you a chance to continue with your thoughts about wherever you were about to head in terms of like the timeline of migrating off Drupal 6 to some other option.
Yeah. Two things. Like yourself, I'm not a good hacker. I tried quite a few times to figure out how to exploit the Drupal getting. I had enough Drupal 7 test sites and dev sites. I'll just hack one of my own sites. And I even watched a YouTube video, and wow, the specially crafted URL was artisanally crafted. I'm just not a good hacker. I have to create solutions, not create problems, I guess, which is marketable. But so that's the good news. It's not for the novice. Even the most gaping wide hole in our security, Doug and Mark were not up to the snuff. So that's good if it could keep us obscured. Secondly, as far as updating things routinely, I don't know if it's pertinent to 6 or not, but I think probably Mike's the same way. He can tell us. I don't grab every update that comes along. I wait till it's a security update. It's just not worth the time and effort to fix the README files and the comment blocks and what have you. But as far as the timeline of Drupal 6, I think we're past it. I think the extension that was given was the time period to get it done. And the only reason I have one still sitting that wants to be updated is because they're waiting for some other issue to get mitigated before they can spend the money on it. And as soon as they do, we're going to run fast. Because I'm not happy having a D6 site out there that I'm actually on the hook to do. You know, it'll really be stinky if and who's targeting it? You know, the Russians, if we can call it what it was a Russian invasion on the D7 Armageddon exploitation. It was they were crawling like mad dogs, creating accounts for themselves all over the place. They found a lot of useless sites. Most Drupal sites are just useless. DougVan.com. It means a lot to me and maybe some of you here, but to the Russians, there no credit cards, no important data. It was boring for them. They didn't get into my site, thank goodness. Being on Pantheon, they would have never had file level access anyhow. All they could do is just reroute some stuff and drop some tables. But so that's good news. But yeah, I'm rambling on 3 points and I have no idea which one I'm on. So
okay, it's okay.
Stop there.
But I do want to follow up on one of your points. And we'll give Mike a chance to answer. You did ask one question about this idea of updating, so I'll respond to that. So actually, one of the things that I do is every Sunday, I actually do get onto my server, and I use Drush, and I'll do my Drush up on the sites to bring them up to date. And I don't really care whether it's a security release or not a security release. Like, I just keep things updated. Just as a matter of course. It doesn't take too long to run Drush up. And I mean, again, full disclosure, like I have backup and migrate running. So every night I've got the database backup so I can recover to that. But I don't have this whole DevOps workflow that, okay, let's do the updates in this environment before we put it into production. I'm kind of like going on faith that like, yeah, the code updates are generally okay. And if something bad happens, Drush does, when you do your Drush up, it gives you, okay, here's what it looked like before, and I've got the database backup, so I could recover from it. But I'm making it a pretty fast process each week and just Drush up. And in fact, I run multi-site. I know Pantheon hates multi-site, but like, sorry, like to make things easy, thanks, Doug, for putting the mailing list in there. I'm going to make sure that I get that in the references, the links there. So I am even doing Drush up -L, to get things done there and see about whether I need to update the databases. So I am actually staying on top of things, keeping them up. But speaking of Drush up, here's the deal. There's a security update for Drupal 6, but Drupal 6 is no longer supported release. So if you go into your site and you do a Drush up on your Drupal 6 site, it's going to tell you that there's no updates available. So in this situation, to get your Drupal 6 site updated and get the security patch applied, you're gonna have to go through your good old-fashioned method and whatever it is that you use. For me, it was a matter of doing a wget and a tar extract this, and then go through this whole process of, okay, because you leave the sites folder alone, right? So you're gonna dump all the other folders and all the other files, and you're gonna move it. So I have to go through the whole manual process of getting these Drupal 6 sites.
That's the Stone Age, man. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the deal that it was with Drupal 6 because you couldn't do your Drush up anymore. Mike, let's give it a chance to throw back to you so you can answer Doug's question about what strategy you are taking with sites right now, how frequently you do run your code updates on the sites.
It varies on the site. Realistically, if the site is something I'm actively working on, I'll run the updates periodically as I'm working on the project, just to keep things rebased where they should be.
Mm-hmm.
And in a more formal DevOps side of things, you tend to freeze whatever you're working on unless there's a security update, just to make sure that you don't break something on the automation.
Right.
So in those cases, I wouldn't be running updates unless they were a critical security update that needed immediate attention. As far as one of the things, I was just thinking about something you were saying. You could still somewhat automate your updates, and I think one of the ways you can do that is usually through something like a Drupal make or an automation like that,
Right.
where you can pull in your new core via the make file and regenerate the site, that kind of thing. One of the things I did find interesting is something that Acquia did as part of the release announcement that they did depreciating Drupal 6. Acquia came out and said, we do offer an LTS support system for Drupal 6 for the next period of time. And I think if it came down, and this is a valid concern too that I don't think we've really talked about, maybe there's cases where you can't update. For whatever reason, there's a legacy module, software component, whatever, that can't be migrated to Drupal 7, either for software support reasons or for any number of concerns. One thing to consider would be going to a company that's offering an LTS support package, like Acquia, or like a couple of the other ones that have managed it. I believe on the Drupal subreddit, there's a thread about that mentioned a couple of companies that are offering LTS support. And that could be an option as well, is to consider maintaining with one of those organizations.
Actually, I've got a question, because I didn't even think about. So, Doug, you mentioned you're actually on Pantheon. Do you know? And I know that Pantheon does put certain security measures in place. So even with Drupal Get-in, the way that Pantheon has their platform set up, even when people hadn't updated their Drupal sites, they were still protected in some fashion or another. I'm curious. Do you know? Is Pantheon planning to boot people off the platform if they're on Drupal 6?
There's no 6 on Pantheon.
Oh, so Pantheon has never had Drupal 6.
Correct.
Yeah, I've never had to do a Drupal 6 site on Pantheon. Everything I've done on Pantheon has been, Drupal 7. I haven't done a Drupal 8 on Pantheon. I haven't done a Drupal 8 for anybody yet at all, period. But okay, so Pantheon would not be an option for you. Mike is mentioning that Acquia is giving some long-term support option. I haven't used. I've poked around on Acquia, but I haven't actually built any production sites on Acquia, so I'm not too terribly familiar with their interface. Mike, are you running any sites on Acquia?
I am not at the moment. I was running a development site, but I've worked on Acquia projects with Acquia, and those have all been on Acquia Cloud.
Okay. And so, I guess, obviously, they have to have Drupal 6 on Acquia if they're going to be providing any long-term support. So I guess that would maybe be, yes. You're saying that would be an option for some people, would just be considering putting themselves over to a platform like Acquia.
Yeah, and it's going to come down to if it's important enough that they cannot process a migration for, again, whatever reasons, legacy software, any number of concerns. Entering into a support contract with an organization that is prepared to support this is probably a smarter move. But I'm not saying that that's the solution for everybody. It's not cheap at all.
Yeah.
But if it's something you have to maintain, it's an option.
And to be fair, Acquia and Pantheon both have a situation where the files, other than the file system itself, they're not directly writable on production. So they were both heavily mitigated against issues with Drupal Get-in. And many independent hosts out there, many independent servers, if they're run correctly, you cannot write to anything but the files directory on a production server. So in those cases, it's all your Bluehost, one-on-one host, or GoDaddy host, and all those other crazy places where it's SFTP wide open kind of a thing where there was an issue.
Okay. All right. So when we look in terms of migrating options, then, and I don't want us to get too much off on the idea of backdrop. I don't want this to become a Drupal versus backdrop type of discussion, or in looking at let's just get off Drupal entirely and go to some other option, whatever it is, Wix or Weebly or Squarespace or blah, 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 this, that. Let's look in terms of people who do, WordPress, and this isn't to turn it into an argument of, this tool versus that tool. Because when you look at those situations, then you're still dealing with the same question of you're going to have to rebuild your site. You're going to have to re-engineer the site. And if you're planning to go to any of those other platforms, then you've come up with a budget to do that type of a migration. And if you've come up with a budget to do that type of migration, and if that's the best choice for you, that's fine. That's just a completely separate issue. Yeah. So I don't think it's really all that beneficial for us to get into those types of discussions. Let's keep it more focused then on people who are going to be wanting to stay with Drupal, because there's actually a couple of options that they would have for that. One of which is the fact that Drupal 8 does actually come with pretty much a one-button click migration. They've got migration templates in place to get you from Drupal 6 to Drupal 8. The big caveat, though, is that not all the contributed modules have been ported to Drupal 8, and so it'll port what it can port for you automatically. But if the modules haven't been, if these corresponding modules aren't on Drupal 8, there's nothing magic that Drupal 8 does to bring you in. No. So the modules will still need to have those templates. And then the other piece of it is, even given the fact, let's pretend that all of the modules you were using in your Drupal 6 site have actually been ported to Drupal 8. You aren't necessarily going to want to bring across that same exact information architecture that you had in your site on Drupal 6. So it might give you an intermediate way that you could at least get off Drupal 6 is to just run this it's honestly, I did it at Badcamp this past year. It was amazing. We looked at, there was this Drupal 6 site that they, gave us the database for, and it's really like you click this button on Drupal 8 and it pulled the Drupal 6 site in. So it couldn't be any easier. So that could potentially be an option for some people to say, let me just jump from Drupal 6 to Drupal 8 with their migration. But then on the other hand, they may not be able to do that because not all the contributed modules are there. And there is the feature as well to get from Drupal 7 to Drupal 8 very quickly. And so for some people, maybe it would make more sense to see about going to Drupal 7. So let me get your thoughts on somebody who does want to stay with Drupal. They are on Drupal 6 right now. They are saying, okay, I'm hearing what these people are saying, and I need to get some plan to get off Drupal 6. Well, what are your thoughts in terms of Drupal 7? I want
to flag right off the top, and just because this is my own history, I don't subscribe to the idea of the one-button upgrade. Most cases, if it's an extremely basic site, it probably works. But in my experience, it usually doesn't. There's always some caveat. You might have custom hooks in place that do certain things. You might have non-supported modules. You might have custom views that have special things going on. In more cases than not, one-click upgrades never work. And I don't like to push them as an idea because you're going to have a problem. You may not see it right away, but you're probably going to. So if you're going to invest in a migration, you're going to invest in a process to get your site not just ported, but usually if you're going to go to the effort of porting a site, you're probably going to go through the effort of improving it in some fashion at the same time. Either it be a new theme, extra functionality, because in most cases for a migration, if it wasn't for an end-of-life scenario, you're moving to a new platform because that new platform offers a specific improvement that the other platform didn't have that your site would benefit from. You usually don't migrate just because there's a big fancy new increment in the number. It's usually a very specific reason in business case.
Okay.
Totally agree. Henry Ford didn't offer a horse with wheels on it. He offered a completely different solution to the problem of getting from point A to point B. And Drupal 8 is, if anything ever, in all the history of Drupal improvements, Drupal 8 is nothing like Drupal 7 whatsoever. So for that reason, Mike's absolutely right. Clients don't want to just have the exact same thing with a different version because they won't even feel that. If there was a one-button click for that,
you have to justify the cost of them. If you're giving them exactly what they have with a different engine in it, but they don't ever open the hood, or they never have a reason to open the hood, there's it's very difficult to justify that to a client. They say, yeah, just here, pay me $5,000 to migrate your site to Drupal 7. Nothing will actually change.
Yeah, I feel like a mafia boss getting a convenience fee from the corner store. I won't bust it down. I won't bust windows if you pay the fee. But yeah, so that still seems dirty to me to charge that much for a quick upgrade. It is an opportunity, and Mike didn't say this. I thought you were going to say this. You didn't bring up, it's a chance for a redesign too.
Well, I did, new theme, but
oh yeah, there you go. You said one thing. So yeah, so it is a chance to step things up. Drupal gets a black eye for 2 black eyes sometimes for forcing people to kind of redo everything every couple of years. I pity the fool whose website today looks like it did when Drupal 7 came out. I mean, maybe in the lifespan of 7, you've already gone through 2 significantly good changes. Not $1 million design contract with a big design agency, unless you want to. You've got the ROI and spend $1 million on it. But just making it fresher. So I think the timing of Drupal 8 is good to get some fresh designs out there. And I'm still a bigger fan of custom migration scripts than I am of Migrate. I've attended the sessions on it and everything else. But Mike, your thoughts on the Migrate module? Are you handy with it?
Every time I've used it, I've ended up causing other problems with it.
Yeah.
I don't mind it. I've used things that use it, but I've never had to go down and build migration that way yet.
Yeah.
I do usually end up doing a different workflow. If I'm doing a new site for somebody or migration to that site, usually the only things they get moved are content, and there are many ways to move content.
Yeah. You can be quick and dirty with an RSS feed and a view. A view on the source.
There you go.
I mean,
feeds,
you
yeah.
can get a long way.
Yeah, and that's happened. Yeah.
Okay, so here it seems like what the two of you are saying is that not only do you feel like people should be thinking about getting off Drupal 6, but you're saying, and as long as you're getting off at the Drupal 6, go ahead and do something besides just getting off Drupal 6. But invest the money, invest the time to get something more than just saving yourself the potential security concerns if you were to stick on 6. Just let this be the impetus for you to go ahead. And Doug, I mean, you're talking about like the lifespan of Drupal 7 and how some people may have gone through some iterations on their site. Then you look at like, okay, but how many people, maybe the Drupal 6 site was around for however long. Just think how old that design may be that they have. So maybe you could be just a good kick in the pants to say, well, you ought to have been re-engineering, redesigning your site anyway, and now you've just been given the reason, given the fact that this isn't supported anymore. So I haven't discussed this with any of my clients yet, and maybe I've been negligent. Maybe this is something that I would suffer a fair amount of criticism and abuse for. That I haven't said anything to any of my clients on D6. I mean, I knew that D6 was going to be reaching end of life. I looked at it though, saying like, but seriously, if I talk to these people, I know what they're going to tell me. I don't have any money. Like I can't get off D6. Like I don't have any money to do this. And so to me, it seemed like it didn't make any sense to even bring up the conversation because I just didn't see it going any place. And I don't know, like, I don't think I'm entirely wrong about that. So when you look at talking to people saying, well, let's go ahead and let's re-engineer your site so that you get something more out of the money that you're doing, I kind of wonder how that conversation would go. If it's going to be a tough enough conversation to say, look, D6 isn't supported anymore. Here's the risk that you're facing. We need to move you off this. And then, oh, by the way, let's just go ahead and redo everything on top of it. And some of that's going to be forced anyhow, because some of the stuff you're not going to be able to bring it over the same way that it was in D6. So I don't know what, like,
I have a thought there. This speaks to the nature of contrib space and how it is or is not going to move along. Those of us when D6 came out, February 24th of 08, remember that Contrib was way behind for quite a while. 07 took so long to build that actually Contrib got a pretty good head start. So we were doing some pretty cool things in the first 90 days of D7, things we couldn't do in the first 6 months of D6. I think you'll find that echoed from a lot of people who've been around longer than me even. D8 is interesting because it took a fair amount of time to get that out the door. And personally, I think the nature of the API of Drupal 8 and the way the underpinnings work, I think your top shops are more inclined to run free with code, and rather than wait for a contrib module to come out, they'll take that. Look at an RFP today in the last day of February, and they'll be like, "Wow, if this was D7, I would use this, these 7, 10, 12 contrib modules, and I would build it and I'd push it out the door in 90 days." But that's not available, and the client wants it in 8, understandably. I think shops are going to take, or already have taken, these RFPs and said, "This is what we're going to charge," and we'll just write the code to get it done because, hallelujah, it's MVC mostly, at least it's OOP, and our coders aren't complaining and griping and whining all the time now. So we're just going to get it done and write code. And if we can update a module along the way and contribute it, that happens a lot too, so we all benefit from that. But I honestly think that we're in an era where contrib is going to suffer a little, because now it's much more convenient and native for shops to just write their own stinking code. Why put a big, huge API around it when it does one thing and it does that thing that way? If the next client needs it, change 12 or 15 lines of code, reuse that code base, and maybe schedule some off time. To people that are willing to actually wrap a UI around it. Because we've already been told we're not going to see a lot of our D7 modules move to D8. We're going to see modules birthed in D8 that you do things the D8 way. Same way we're not moving D6 to D8. So that's what's going to happen there. So for that reason, I think anybody hoping to move their site one click might find it a little more difficult. And can anybody clarify for me the $500,000 that Acquia spent on updating things? Is that past tense, or is that still on?
It's still on, but I think there's a process for initialization. Of building a module that the community is considered important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fair enough.
To be fair about it's considered important towards how
part of their
builds. I'm seeing that we may be getting a bit of breakup on the signal here. Mike, you were kind of locking up some, and I see that Doug is actually dropped out here for it's telling us that it's about time to wrap. I'd like to just open anything, questions that I haven't asked us to address, any points that I haven't asked us to consider, in this whole discussion, or over and over again. Okay, come again. Say that again for me, Mike. I didn't catch all the stuff that you said there.
I think you kind of beat this one to death. I was one of the that can be said forward.
Okay, great. And Doug, I think I hope we're able to pick you up there. So if you want to give your final thoughts before we wrap this up.
Yeah, get off of Drupal 6 fast, and don't ask me to do it. I'm not that interested.
So there you have it for this week's Drupal chat. I've got Discuss installed on the website, so if you're watching this later on and you wanted to agree with or disagree with anything that we said, you can feel free to put your comments in the comment stream there. And look forward to seeing people on future Drupal chats. Our next one will be on when is Drupal not, or is, a a good option. So thank you, Doug, and thank you for Mike. Thank you, Mike, for taking part in the show today. It's always nice to have some people share their opinion, and actually it did make the conversation quite a bit different than it would if I were by myself today. So I welcome anybody to take part in upcoming chats. It's always great to have people participate. And seeing as now that Doug and Mike are both audio only, I think I'm getting my final warning from the internet gods here to wrap it up. So I'll say thanks once again to Doug. Thanks once again to Mike. It was great getting a chance to talk to the two of you, and I will sign off for now. So until next week, that's it for this week's Drupal chat, and I hope to see you next week.
Bye-bye.